Joining us now, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, who's also introducing his own legislation to try to stop this executive order. I want to understand how this would work. He's a presidential candidate, of course, and he's working hard out on the campaign trail. It's difficult out there, but on these substantive issues, whether it's on these, how we deal with our foreign policy or surveillance, or in this case, of course, in this horrific push against gun ownership, he's been front and center, and he joins us now. Senator, Happy New Year. How are you?
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we have a bill that is called the Separation of Powers Act, and what we do is we defund or we take away any federal funding that would support an executive order that would diminish our Second Amendment rights. The problem is, as you've outlined it, we gave up that power when we passed this last spending bill. So while we control the House and we control the Senate, we have zero power because we've abdicated the power of the purse. We've allowed the president now to do whatever he wants. So if we tried to defund or have an defund executive orders, my bill will take 60 votes, and there are not 6 Democrats to do it. But had we let it happen by letting spending expire, we would have reversed things.
Right.
And then the Democrats would have had to have 60 votes to fund his executive orders. Or if we did it for a short period of time, 1 or 2 month spending bills, then we come back and revisit it. Then if he tries to do that, we have leverage over him. Mm-hmm. So we have no leverage, but it's our own damn fault that we've let this happen.
Now, I have to say that when I watched the Ryan announcement on the funding agreement and the omnibus, and he announces it, and he runs out of town, and then he tries to make this point that they're not tripling the number of these workers coming into the United States, which, of course, as many folks have written about, Breitbart, et cetera, that's false. I think to myself, well, I guess now we know where the Republican Party firmly is right now, and it seems like the Republican Party on Capitol Hill has one mission. That's to help Obama enact his agenda. I don't see any opposition to Obama's agenda in a meaningful way. Rhetorically, Senator Paul, you can do that, but substantive opposition that's meaningful, I don't see it. I just don't see it.
But there's a great deal of resistance to Obama's agenda and to spending and deficits outside of Washington. But once you get in Washington, here's the debate. Those who have been there a long time say we must govern, we must be the adults in the room, and we must not have any hiccups or shutdowns. And then others of us, myself and other conservatives, are saying, well, my goodness, if you're going to preside over a government and you're going to govern a government that borrows $1 million a minute, maybe a shutdown or letting the spending expire is a much better alternative. That way we could use our leverage. But if you announce in advance, if you preemptively surrender that leverage, then President Obama gets everything he wants, and that's what's happening now.
We're talking to Rand Paul here on the Laura Ingraham Show. The news of Saudi Arabia and Iran, of course, more tensions in the Middle East, which sends the establishment out to the microphones demanding adult leadership in Washington, D.C., specifically, the Republicans, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio. What is your sense on how things are developing with the execution of that Shiite cleric, and whether the American people have a lot of faith in our own ability to affect events in the Middle East when there are these centuries-old conflicts within Islam itself?
Well, the thing is on both sides, both in Iran and in Saudi Arabia, summary execution is something that's commonplace. But this is really stoking the flames, and there's a very good chance that the minority Shiite population in Saudi Arabia is going to rebel, and things are going to get worse. And you're right, ISIS and all of the other turmoil is in the midst of a 1,000-year war between Sunni and Shiite. But it's all become worse because of the Iraq War, frankly. When Saddam Hussein was toppled, Iran and Iraq became better friends. This emboldened Iran, and Iran became stronger. Now you have an axis of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Russia that are all made stronger as a result, a long-lasting result of the Iraq War. And so I think this is one reason why we finally had a good debate in the last presidential debate about whether regime change is a good idea or a bad idea. And frankly, I think those who want to topple Assad, who still want to topple Assad, do not realize it, but they will make ISIS stronger if they topple Assad.
Are you closer to Trump on foreign policy or someone like Rubio?
I think my foreign policy is neither Trump nor Rubio nor Clinton, but I have pointed out that Clinton and Rubio are very, very similar on their foreign policy. They believe in regime change. Mm-hmm. They're big proponents of foreign aid to countries that often hate us and burn our flag. Trump doesn't really have a foreign policy in the sense he doesn't have a consistent one. He said he was opposed to the first Iraq war, and so was I. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, Trump is sort of in the Cruz camp of, let's bomb them into oblivion. Let's have indiscriminate carpet bombing, which once you start bombing a lot of civilian cities, the reaction to that may well be worse than what we already have. And so you can bomb, one generation and then the next generation rises up, particularly if there were people who were bombed that were not participating in the war in any way. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that there is a coherent philosophy that comes from Trump on either economic policy or foreign policy. And I guess what worries me about Trump is that he didn't really know what the nuclear triad was, but then within a week his spokesman came out and said that our biggest problem is that we have been unwilling to use our nuclear arsenal. That kind of statement should really disqualify him from being considered, because you don't want someone who really thinks that the nuclear arsenal is something we should be eager to use. And
so what's
that
going on,
statement
Senator?
should be examined and examined.
Yeah, all that you're saying, to me, makes perfect sense. It really does. So why did 13,000 people show up in Biloxi, Mississippi to see him on Saturday night?
I think curiosity, and I think also that the meat...
Curiosity, Senator?
Curiosity.
They haven't seen enough of Donald Trump?
But I think... the thing is that also this morning I turned on one of the news channels. He's on for 45 minutes straight. And so it's a self-reinforcing news cycle, but we have a really lazy sort of news apparatus in the sense that it covers the same thing over and over again, and they can't get enough of Trump. And so it has become a self-reinforcing philosophy, a prophecy at this point.
Right, but someone as
smart
as
and I don't know
you,
what the answer is to it.
Well, you're really, you're super smart. And I'm not trying to suck up to you. I really believe that. You're super smart. And I say the same thing to you as I would say to Rubio. Like, there's something going on out there in the party, right? And I think on some issues, you and he, and I'm not saying his positions are all fleshed out or they're all that clear sometimes. I agree with you on that. But it seems to me that you hit a certain stride with younger voters, right, in independent voters, libertarians, who really like your message. He hits a stride with people who haven't voted maybe, and people are just ticked off, mad. They want to turn the table over in Washington. But there's clearly something happening more than curiosity. I think for either you or Rubio or Jeb just to throw your hands up, the media's created him. I just think you're doing yourself a disservice. And I'm not saying you're doing it on purpose or anything, but I'm just saying there's something we have to learn from this to become better.
Well, I think the thing that I think everyone acknowledges, myself included, that people are unhappy. So am I. Right. I mean, I ran for office. Right. I could be back in Bowling Green practicing eye surgery. I ran for office because I was unhappy with Washington, unhappy with debts, and still I'm the leading contender who is fighting against the Washington establishment. But the point I have to make, because it is a competition, is that I have a coherent philosophy of limited government that I can trace back to those who wrote the Magna Carta, those who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Yep. Trump is more of just a narcissist that is loud and bombastic. But my fear is that he says, trust me because I'm all-powerful and I'll fix things. Mm-hmm. But if that fixing doesn't include a philosophy that thinks that government should be restrained and that it means that Trump himself needs more power to fix things, I worry about that, because that's the kind of statement and the kind of philosophy that can lead to authoritarianism. So I do worry about a Trump candidacy.
What if he asks you to come work with him?
I've got, quite a bit going on running for president, and
after
we're still running
let's say you don't
win.
No, but I know you want to win, and we adore you. But let's say it doesn't work out. He could really be helped by you. And it maybe is how you have to serve the country. I mean, I know you don't want to think that, and I know nobody wants to think everyone wants to be president. I get it. But what if your country is calling you to serve in a different way, beyond just being a senator or a great doctor?
We'll cross all bridges, when we get to them. But, I have an important role in the U.S. Senate as well as my candidacy for the presidency.
You do.
So we'll see when we get there. But I do think that it's really premature. I'm in New Hampshire as we speak. And a lot of people haven't made their mind up. And so what's happened is we've been totally led by the nose by polling, such that it's destroying the race in so many ways. We need to wait and let's see what happens when voters actually turn out.
What's this? Explain. My staff wants me to ask you about this, and I think it's probably a good question. This EB-5 visa program, back in October, you introduced legislation to expand this visa program, and it would basically make this program permanent and raise the total number of visas under the program by a significant amount. It's another type of work visa, I guess, that would, probably make it harder for Americans to get jobs.
These are people that'll bring $1 million, and if they bring $1 million to this country,
you can buy citizenship?
They get into this. They get into this visa program. They get into the visa program. But the thing is like one of my ideas for trying to rejuvenate some of our cities is like in Detroit, is to try to bring people in with capital who will move into there, and that you would have a visa category for people who would go and work in economically deprived areas. And I think that and bringing money into our country is a good idea. In fact, like if we had a better tax system in our country, if we had my flat tax of 14.5%, then you would have more businesses wanting to locate here instead of the opposite. Right now, we have businesses wanting to locate in other countries.
Well, but Senator Paul, my prediction has always been that China is going to be rebuilding Detroit for us at some point. And people look at me like I'm crazy, but I think there are a number of different ways it could happen. And I guess it could happen under the EB-5 program. Well, could Chinese businessmen come in and say, "Let us handle this for you"? And why is that good for America? Again, I'm not following that.
Having people locate their businesses here, where the people who have to do the work in the businesses are actually located here, is a good idea. And so, we have had different discussions about whether or not we should preclude, foreigners from investing in our country. But for the most part, investment is good, capital is good, and jobs are good. And actually, when they're investing in things that are in our country, the jobs actually have to be here. But the bottom line is, if you want jobs to be here, you have to have a friendly tax structure, and we have some of the most unfriendly tax environment in the entire world. Our corporate tax is 35%, the highest in the world. Canada's is 15%. Most of Europe is between 12 and 25%. So we're pushing ourselves out of the marketplace. Our regulatory burden is greater. So we have to, in order to be competitive again, we have to have lower taxes and less regulation in our country.
I agree with that. You wrote that book, Government Bullies, which was phenomenal, just outlining how the government just makes it so difficult and onerous day to day for regular working class people. And I love that book. It was phenomenal. We really appreciate your joining us, Senator Paul, and you have been leading the way in a clear, I think, founders-based way of looking at government for many, many years. It's so important, and we really wish you the best of luck out there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura.
All right, we'll take a break.